where we foster growth in early stage companies. So we give them office space for 6 months, 6 to 9 month term. We provide them with about $350,000 perks package, so discounts from all types of companies that they would use to cut overhead expenses like AWS, Google, HubSpot, SendGrid, loads of others. And we give them business curriculum. So we put them through classes that help teach them the foundations of how to build a startup business, an entrepreneurial business. And then we, as a law firm, help them avoid pitfalls that most startups meet. So how to protect your IP, how to understand a term sheet, how to negotiate a term sheet, how to, as we're going to discuss tonight, take your business cross-border, and avoid some of the mistakes that founders make along that path. We also help companies, most importantly, at this stage with fundraising strategy. So using our network, we introduce them to our relationships, investors, angel investors, VCs, other funding sources to help get those companies to the next level. We also have as a law firm, have a strong middle market practice. So we do M&A, public securities transactions, and have a full service litigation department, which hopefully you won't. But we do have those capabilities. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Michael McLean with the International Business Accelerator.
Thanks, Heidi. We're grateful to partner with Stubbs Alderton and the Preccelerator for this. We feel also lucky that we can operate in the accelerator space, that we don't really compete with other accelerators because we're the only one in the country that we know of, certainly in California, where our focus is cross-border expansion. We take tech companies, we take service companies, and we take product companies as well. So we like to think that we complement what other great programs like Heidi's and Preccelerator do. Contact info is over there on the board. A little bit about the IBA, International Business Accelerator. We have been around for 3 years. We have 2 locations in Long Beach and LAX, Silicon Beach, LAX Coastal. We've graduated 17 companies. About 60% of those are women founders, women-led, which is by design. We're very proud of that. We do not invest in our companies, therefore we don't take equity, so it's a program fee. And on average, the program fee for the IBA comes back at a 15 to 20x ROI, measured against just the first invoice for that first international sale, partnership, distribution deal, whatever it may be. So, since we don't take equity, since we don't fund and we don't take equity, our success is really measured in more generalities like a global perspective of the companies that we work with, and Chris will get into that more. Also, the market entry is the second thing that we like to make sure is solid, in that our companies go into the market with the research, with the preparation, whether it be the IP and the immigration and all the other things that Jonathan will talk about, and ready to go. So in 90 days, the expectation is they're cross-border in their new market internationally and successful. And then the funding readiness, of course, if you're a domestic company with a domestic outlook, and let's say there are 325 million people here in the States, all of a sudden you go into Europe, there's 740 some million there. And if you go to Africa, they're over 1 billion, and of course in Asia, they're over 4 billion. So your prospective market looks very different when you're a global company targeting global customers. So a couple things I wanted to point out before we start, because some of this may be a little bit, may cause you to have a little bit of reluctance to go global. There are a lot of things that you have to be vigilant of that we'll talk about. 75% of global purchasing power is abroad. So if you're playing here domestically, you're looking at 25% of what you should be going for. And Julianne here will do something that I was always shocked. What I was shocked when I learned about it is that Uncle Sam and the federal government will actually partner with you. And as a business owner, I always thought the federal government was more of a nuisance trying to get their hands on my pocket and make my life more difficult. But you'll be astounded that the government really is an advocate for exporting. She'll explain that. And also, I'd like you guys to walk out of here with an understanding or an explanation of why it would be more, why it would have more financial risk for you guys to export to, let's say, Kansas than Kathmandu? Why would it be financially less risky to go to Lithuania or Laos than it would be to Long Beach in doing business? So, something to keep you focused. So, this is my partner, Chris Lynch. He can introduce himself better than I can because he has such a broad expertise in international commerce. He's a professor of economics and international business. He ended his career as the consul general, career of foreign service officer in the State Department, and founder of the IBA. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking part of your evening to talk for us, to give you a short presentation. This is certainly a topic that we could have a 12-day seminar on, but we're going to do it in an hour. We're going to have some brief introductions of each sort of topic, and then allow time for you for question and answers during the process, and then afterwards to interact more. This is a thing. This is a process tonight just to whet your appetite. I'm going to get you thinking about that. More importantly, to have you ask some questions as you're going forward, and we'll maybe give some ideas where you can find some of those answers. I started as, well, Michael mentioned, my background was as a U.S. diplomat. I was always involved with economic, business, trade policy at five different countries. Did trade negotiations, did renegotiations of debt, etc. After that, career here in California, and really I was always interested in the whole sort of entrepreneurial story. Worked with that quite a bit when I was even with the State Department here in California. This is where this heart is. And so what my concept for the International Business Accelerator is simply that we are able to get you thinking about going global. Thinking yourself as a global company. You may be at the very founding stage, but I would argue that having a global company gives you a different perspective. You're going to develop your products differently. You're going to market them differently because you're going to have to take into consideration what other cultures want and expect. You're going to be hiring different kinds of people. And just lastly, you're going to be developing and growing differently. And that's some of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight, some of these elements. So before we start into the actual panel, just have a couple minutes here for each of our panelists to introduce themselves. And Jonathan?
Sure. So I'm Jonathan Friedman. I'm a partner in the law firm of Stubbs Alderton Markiles. At the firm, I'm in the corporate department there. So we represent middle market businesses all the time, startup companies, emerging growth companies, and basically help them along their growth path. Whatever it is they need to achieve, we try and facilitate that. So that can mean, helping the founders set up their business, helping them raise capital, be it angel financing or venture capital rounds or debt financing rounds, helping them expand their businesses both within the United States and internationally. Myself, being from Canada, I have a pet project of mine is to facilitate cross-border businesses between Canada and the U.S., helping Canadian companies come down here, helping U.S. companies access the Canadian market when they want to do that. On the back end, and as companies grow, we facilitate mergers and acquisitions for the companies we represent. Buy and sell transactions, we take companies public, and then once they're public, we facilitate their public reporting requirements and everything on that end as well, and help them raise capital in public markets. So pretty broad and exciting practice at our firm. Happy to be a part of it, and I'm glad to be here, and thank you for taking your time as well to hear us.
Julianne?
Well, good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me? Yes. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to see so many of you here. And yes, I am Julianne Hennessy, and I'm the director of the West Los Angeles office of the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service. So we are in West Los Angeles, but we have an office in downtown Los Angeles, the Southern California, starting from Fresno, Ventura, and then all the way down to San Diego. Offices are across the country and around the world, which I'll tell you about later. But our job is to assist U.S. businesses to expand in international markets. And we are the government, but we really are a resource for you. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that as well. Over the years that I've done this, I have seen how dramatically, I want to say, business has changed. And obviously one of the key factors is the internet and just email. You know, how easy it is to do business and to communicate back and forth, with markets all around the world, and how easy it is to connect with Asia, Europe and Africa. It really is a lot easier than it used to be, I can say that. My career started, I was a stockbroker years ago, when the market was just coming out of the bear market, so that tells you where it was then and where it is now. So obviously a brilliant growth in the market. But then I went into international trade, and I started on the import side. I did compliance work on the import side. You've been hearing a lot about anti-dumping duties, perhaps, countervailing duties, subsidies, and tariffs. This was an office that I started in Washington, D.C. at the Department of Commerce. So now I'm on the export side, so it's kind of an interesting dynamic to see how it works in the trade world. So.
Matt?
Hi everyone, I'm Matt Khalili. I'm from White & Co. We're a global investment bank. I particularly specialize in preparing business plans and feasibility studies for new ventures. A lot of them want to enter internationally, or a lot of foreign entrepreneurs want to come in domestically. What we specialize a lot in as well is investment visas. So the various programs in the U.S. where foreign entrepreneurs can invest or start projects in the U.S. and earn residency or employment status rights in the U.S. So I work with a lot of developers who are looking to raise capital, entrepreneurs that want to raise capital. I place potential investors with them and matchmake them. And I help people really understand how they're going to develop their growth path and how they're going to succeed. So it's a little about me, and I'm excited to share anything I know with you guys.
Okay, thank you. So how we're going to structure this tonight is the panel is entitled Cross-Border Expansion and Financing. So we're going to do the cross-border expansion first. And I'm going to ask both Jonathan and Julianne to do a short presentation, about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll allow time for question and answer. Then we'll go into the second part of the discussion, which is cross-border financing. Again, Matt will make a presentation, and we'll all chime in a number of areas in terms of financing that we all know. And then on both sides, we're going to be allowing questions, okay? So that your questions are going to be how you're going to guide this discussion. We're going to do a 30,000-foot overview. You tell us the levels that you are interested in. So Jonathan.
Sure. So I got to digress for a second. So who is Canadian in the audience tonight? Anyone? Just one. Sorry, you a hockey fan? Hockey fan or not a hockey fan?
Dual citizen.
There you go. So, I figured there wouldn't be many
I'm a figure
Canadians here.
skater.
Oh, there you go.
I'm from Minnesota.
Your team's out, my team's in, and the guys at the office were total slack for planning this event. They're like, Jonathan, it could be Game 7 tonight, and you planned this event on the day where you. So now I'm missing the game, but it's all good. So, and another show of hands. So, how many people in the room have a business where they've considered going international or have gone international with what they're doing or otherwise? Yeah, so quite a few. Yeah, that's good to know. So I'm going to start from the premise that you've made the decision to go international and you're trying to figure out what you need to do. And obviously there's a number of different ways you can do it, each of which involve differing levels of management expertise, corporate resources, and just time commitments to figure out, right? So, the simplest way if you're looking to export products is potentially to sell to someone domestically that then exports the product for you, you get international exposure that way, and you're basically delegating to that third party dealing with the export administration and so on. Easiest way to do it. The second way is to sort of try and go about it yourself and ship directly into a new territory. And that may or may not involve sending people internationally to help you develop the marketplace, which entails its own things in terms of figuring out employment-related issues. The next sort of level up is potentially opening up an office in a foreign territory, which may or may not be considered a branch for tax purposes, depending on what you're doing. And then, further down the scale, you could potentially form a subsidiary to a U.S.-based company, and that entails its own analysis of a bunch of issues. And then, aside from sort of the do-it-your-own, there's also other ways you can enter into a new territory, such as buy an existing business, which is an M&A related transaction, or you could enter into a joint venture with an entity that operates in a territory, and sometimes it's mandatory depending on where you're going, to get that sort of local partner expertise in terms of their knowledge of the marketplace. So I could spend an hour on each one of those quite easily. We don't have that type of time, so I'm just going to basically highlight legal issues that you need to consider when you go international. It's going to be like a shotgun approach, but here I go. Best I can do in 10 minutes. So obviously you have immigration issues, and that can be a huge issue. I often say that before you even talk to me as a corporate lawyer, you need to talk to your tax people and your immigration people to see what's going on that front, because often immigration and tax, or not often, they will always drive sort of the structure of things. So if you're taking talent across a border, it's not a smooth process. I mean, as a Canadian coming down here, I can tell you I went through an enormous hassle. I've been on TN, H-1B visas. I had a green card, and now I'm a dual citizen finally. But it took a lot of time. So when you're going into another territory, I highly encourage you to speak to the immigration people early, figure out what needs to be done, because there's many ways you can get talent across the border. Next is, let's say you're going to be hiring people in another territory. Well, it's just like it is here. It's complicated, right? So, they have their own labor laws, and guess what? They're not going to be the same way as they are here. So you're going to need to think about things like, how do I make them an offer? What does that look like? What's customary in the territory? What type of taxes am I going to need to withhold? What type of reporting obligations am I going to have? What's involved in compensating them? If I'm offering them stock options, can I use my plan that's in the States, or do I need to tailor it for, like, going into Canada, for instance, in a particular territory there? When I want to get rid of an employee, they're not at will necessarily in other territories. You need to give them notice, right? So it's a whole litany of issues that you need to think about and consider. You need to hire, informed labor counsel on the other side of the border to help you through all those issues. Then, as I alluded to, there's a bunch of tax issues that you need to consider, right? So, if you're selling into a territory, you might have to collect sales tax, which involves a sales, registering for basically that with the appropriate territory. If you're, say I've got a licensing agreement with a territory and I'm collecting royalties, there could be withholding taxes in relation to that. If I'm setting up a branch, I need to consider, the profits on the branch or so the subsidiary. I might have transfer pricing issues that I need to deal with between a U.S. parent and a Canadian sub. Transfer pricing, for those of you who don't know, is if you're dealing with two related entities, the government wants to know that there's a fair price for an exchange of goods. So, for instance, if a Canadian company is selling to a U.S. parent, the Canadian government wants to see some type of markup on the price of the goods so that they can tax that and extract their pound of flesh. Right? That's transfer pricing. Was that? Yeah, exactly. There you go. So, so transfer pricing issues, and then also repatriation of money. If you have money that you want to get back into the U.S., you need to consider taxes that could be on that, and that's governed by various treaties around the world. So, a whole host of tax issues that you need to think about. In terms of the products and services themselves, if you're exporting, obviously, you need to think about export and import licenses, depending on what you're doing. That might be more relevant in some spaces than others, particularly technology. You need to think about, configuring your product to adhere to international standards. Like if you have an electronic component, it might be certified here, but is it the same certification in Canada? And when you're developing the product, you need to think of these issues, and you need to think in advance of these issues about where you think you're going to be going to do this. Obviously, there's intellectual property issues. How am I doing on time? Couple more minutes. Okay, so IP issues, making sure that you've thought about how you're going to protect your product when you go into a new territory, be it trademarks, be it patents, copyright protection, trade secret protection. Do trade secrets there work the same way as they do here? Invention assignment agreements with employees. Am I getting the same type of protection that I think I am with, because it might not be the same in a different territory as it is here, right? So IP-related issues. Obviously, so really fast, there's contractual issues that you need to think about. So, if you're dealing with a foreign country that's not Canada, where the language, it's not the same language in Canada, but it's pretty close. But you're dealing with a foreign territory for real, there's language ambiguity. Words in a certain language don't mean the same as they are here. It's very difficult to negotiate contracts, which language governs the contract, how are disputes governed, which jurisdiction, which law, International deals just open up a host of issues that you need to think about that don't exist just in a domestic context. Obviously, when you form a corporation, you know what it's like here if you have an entity and there's a plethora of them that you can choose from. Well, guess what? When you go international, it can be the same way, but now you're dealing with international tax implications of doing that, and you have to understand the corporate laws associated with how you govern those entities, so just a lot. And then, of course, last but not least is data protection, everyone's favorite topic of the day. Exceedingly complex. We have the GDPR that's going into effect at the end of May, which is going to change the landscape of things, and we're all trying to figure out exactly what that's going to look like. That you need to tailor your privacy policies and terms of use in different territories. It can just be, there's a lot of issues you need to think about. So I could go on. My Leafs are playing tonight. Hopefully I'll catch the third period. Turn it over.
Yeah, so thank you on that one. And this was, as you see, there's a whole series of questions you got to ask ahead of time. Thinking yourself as the global company, not just the U.S. company that happens to do business in another country. Now, the next question is that thinking about the legal side, where can you find, how are you going to be formulating your market entry strategy? And that's going to be obviously tailored for each particular country, but there's also a whole plethora of resources that are available out there, both for market information and actually finding reliable customers, distributors, so forth. So for that, I turn it over to Julianne.
Well, Chris, honestly, very much appreciate both of your comments because they're all so relevant. And I'm sure you've all heard these statistics. It's amazing. But of all the companies that could, the U.S. companies that could export, apparently still 1% of companies actually export. And if they do export, they export to one or two markets, usually Mexico, Canada. And so we always say the world is huge, the potential is extraordinary. But Chris and John, as you were saying, but you just need to know what to expect when you go into international markets. And so as a U.S. government official, as an organization, the commercial service, that is our job, is to assist U.S. companies to understand how to expand and to grow their sales, and as well we advocate for U.S. businesses abroad. So with the numerous programs and services that we offer, with our resources on the ground, both in the U.S. and in Washington, D.C., because obviously we're a federal government agency, and markets around the world, we are there on the ground to assist. Now you could say, well, why need to work with the U.S. government? We're there to help you from the standpoint that we are where maybe you are not. So as you look to expand into international markets, it's not that you can't do it on your own, but hopefully we can expedite the process for you. We can provide you with the resources and the information to just help pave the way for you. Because as Jonathan was saying, as Chris was saying, there is so much to know about going into a market and so much that you can do to mitigate your risk for going into a market. And most of that is just being very adequately prepared and know what to expect. So just to give you a brief overview, a little bit more detail. As I said, I'm with the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service. We are part of what is called the International Trade Administration, which is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. So we are a federal government agency. Within my organization, the U.S. Commercial Service, we not only have a specialist like myself here in Los Angeles, and my colleagues, of course, in downtown Los Angeles, there's 10 of us that cover Los Angeles County and assist my colleague in Ventura County. But we have an office in Irvine, Ontario, San Diego, and as I mentioned, Ventura as well. That's our network, plus Hawaii and Las Vegas and Reno. That's our network. But we have offices all across the country and all around the world. But we also have specialists in Washington, D.C. who focus on industries and who focus on markets. So they become a specialist for a particular market, particular foreign market. But plus we have industry analysts, and their job is to understand the U.S. industry vis-a-vis that industry and getting into new markets around the world would be vis-a-vis that industry. Okay, so it would be the chemical industry, it would be the ICT industry, the building products industry. What are the issues and challenges they may face here in markets around the world? And these are the analysts that know that particular type of issue, all right? So just to give you an idea there, so together that field of specialists is on the domestic side. But now we have our commercial officers and our locally employed staff at embassies, U.S. embassies and consulates around the world. And they are an extraordinary asset for you as well. So these are our officers who are the American diplomats, our U.S. diplomats, and our locally employed staff. And it is their job and our job to do what we can to assist you to do business in that market. Now, what we do is we focus on helping you export to a market. We don't actually work with you in terms of investing in a particular market overseas, because we actually want investment in our country. So we also, as an organization, are focused on inbound investment as opposed to investment overseas. So if it was where all of a sudden you said you wanted to open up a sales office or you wanted to purchase a manufacturing facility, we would in turn refer you to other resources that could assist you with that. Which is, as a federal government agency, we want you growing your sales in international markets through exporting, and also we want that inbound investment because we want obviously investment in our country where now you have to hire more people obviously if you're investing into our country. So we want that to take place here, okay? So how do we do that? How do we do this in terms of helping companies export, as Chris was saying? We have many, many programs that are set up to help you better understand how to sell into a market. So let's say you do sell to Canada or you do sell to Mexico, but you say, I'm really focused on selling to Asia right now, or I'm focusing on Europe or Latin America. It doesn't matter. We have offices at the U.S. embassies and consulates in most of these markets around the world. So it is our staff overseas who write, as an example, what we call country commercial guides. And these are, in my mind, exceptional documents which are for free. They are available to you as an exporter, as a U.S. company or individual, to help you understand how to do business and how to export to a particular market. So as an example, I was just looking at the country commercial guide, which is available on export.gov, which if you're not familiar with, please write that down. It is the government's export portal. So this is where information is housed to help you understand the export process. But we, as the U.S. Department of Commerce, we administer the site, we facilitate the site. So we have our country commercial guides, which are housed on export.gov. And they are fantastic pieces of research which tell you about cultural aspects of doing business in the market, what is the political environment in the country, what is the economic situation, how should you do business in the market, what are the cultural nuances of doing business in the country, what you need to know about selling in the market, what they're, again, developing distribution agreements, what is the most efficient way to sell for certain types of products, what are best prospects. The list goes on. This is all available through you on export.gov through our country commercial guides. We also have, if you look as an example, export.gov/name any country, South Korea as an example, or Mexico or Canada. These are the websites for our country, the websites for our offices in country. So this would be the Commercial Service South Korea office, the Commercial Service Mexico City office, Monterrey office, it doesn't matter. If you pull up export.gov, name the country, you will pull up information about doing specifically for that particular city or region, right, or market. And there again, very valuable information which just gives you what you need to be better prepared to explore a market. So now you say to me, well, Julianne, I'm ready to export. I've exported to a couple of markets. I think I've got this down, but I'm really ready to look at Singapore, or I'm ready to look at Chile, because we have free trade agreements with both of these markets. So what we would do is I would speak, or my colleagues or I would speak with you. We would find out what your objectives are. Most of our companies at this point would be looking for distribution. Because you are a small company, or maybe a larger small company, it's just easier for you because you can't be all places at one time. It's easier for you to perhaps sell to a distributor who takes your product and they make the market for you. So now, as you were saying, Jonathan, the distribution agreement comes into place. But this is someone who's in that market, obviously, which maybe you already are working with distributors, but they're the ones that are to know the market. They know how to get your product sold in that particular market. We have a company now that uses a distributor to do all of their e-commerce business. So they said, I can't focus on e-commerce, it's just too big. I'm going to depend on my distributor to help me do that. So their distributor now does all their social media, all their picture taking, that can be posted online, all their distribution to handle that e-commerce. So as an example, this is just to give you an idea of what a distributor could do. But our expertise lies in helping you find a partner overseas. So because we are on the ground in the market, and because this is what we do, and because of all the connections that we have at the U.S. Embassy and Consulate, our goal is to help you identify the best partner possible. And in most cases for us, our clients, it turns out to be a distributor, because you need to rely on that distributor to help you grow your sales in that market. It's not that you have to work with a distributor, it's just most of our companies tend to do that because to go direct can be challenging in and of itself. Okay? So most of our companies start that way. Yes.
When they have the distribution, so how many percent fee or actually we have to get there?
How we do that? Okay, so I know I'm probably running out of time. Okay, quick summary. Okay, so yes, we do charge for our services, which I can explain in a little bit, but we do charge for our services. But just as an example, we have our Gold Key program, which is where you actually travel to the country to meet face-to-face with potential buyers, potential distributors. If you are considered to be a small company, which has become quite a complicated process actually, to determine how to determine a small company, but if you fit into that category, the fee for that program is $950. But that gives you a list of qualified buyers that you now meet face-to-face with in country, with the opportunity to discuss obviously future business. Okay. So I don't know because I'm out of time, but I think.
Why don't we just take some questions right now and just see how we can understand. Some questions right now about the legal or the market trip, please.
Yeah, I have a question about China. Of course, that's a big market. And my question is about wholly owned foreign enterprises in China. I understand there's several ways to enter the market,
Right.
none of which are easy.
Right.
But if you could perhaps describe that model, that would be helpful.
Candidly, I haven't done a ton of deals in China myself. I know that the government in China, I've read a little bit recently that they're trying to encourage or thinking of ways for allowing companies to go in there and not necessarily have a joint venture. My understanding of the market is typically as you form a joint venture, I don't know if it's actually a legal requirement there, but certainly to do business, it's typically the way things are done. It's sort of the best I can answer that question for you.
Well, it's just funny, you were talking about your hockey game.
Yeah.
Just at 6 o'clock this evening, I arranged a call with colleagues in China to talk about that exact issue for a client. So for Wolfie. So it just how that would be handled if it had to be done the way that they would be told it had to be done. So what we would do there is have you speak with as you know, John, I would have you speak with my colleagues, and then we would refer you to counsel who are very well versed in China law and how to handle something.
If I could provide just a little bit of information, and there are foreign trade zones in China and Shanghai and Shenzhen, and the government of China is encouraging businesses to open virtual businesses in those areas. And you can't actually retail, but you can move your products into those zones and sell them in the zones, not retail, and not into the commerce of that country, but it's a real growing opportunity.
Yes, very good. So, yeah,
If I understand correctly, some U.S. laws reach everywhere you go. Kind of anti-corruption law reaches all
Yeah.
subsidiaries, even your partners, right?
That is true.
Is there any other law that does that as well?
Yeah, export licenses.
Licensing laws, yeah.
There's also
Securities laws.
securities laws. There's also a prohibited persons list.
Yeah.
So the first thing you have to do, it's a little bit different than the export control, but you got to check out if you have a new person suddenly come up in your radar screen, a new customer, and gee, this looks fantastic, too good to be true. Check out the name first of all. Otherwise, you can be going to jail for doing business with that
On the
person.
Bureau of Industry and
Yes.
Security website, they have the list, they call it the list to check.
Yeah.
So you can go on that site and check to see whether it's designated nationals, denied parties, that kind of a thing. You
Yes.
can look and see.
What the name of website?
It's the Bureau of Industry and Security, which is actually part of the Department of Commerce.
Yeah. So they also have an office over in Irvine that covers Western U.S.
That's all you need to check? Because every time, this is a fair question, if you're dealing with foreign nationals, there is always a question, who is under sanctions, who is not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of.
Well, and then you'd want it, well, not to get too complicated, but you'd also then want to check the Office of Foreign Assets Control.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because OFAC, because they're the ones that administer the sanctions programs. So you'd want to check that as well. So it's OFAC, U.S. Treasury.
So the lists were not
Yeah.
there.
At least two, yes.
So there are only blacklists, or are there any whitelists?
Yes, most of the things are whitelists, okay? Most of the things are whitelists. It's just know before you go, just be sure of who you're doing business. It's with any other business. The only thing is that you can get yourself in trouble. One of the things we do in our trainings, we do these mock negotiations. And so what I do is I set up with in certain countries where somebody is negotiating the other side, and the only way to come to a successful resolution of the negotiation is to give a bribe. And as soon as they do that, and they agree to it, I whip out some handcuffs and
Nice.
say to them, and yep, you're off to jail for doing that. So it's incumbent upon you. Check. Not complicated, you just got to ask the questions before you go. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about restrictions with exporting technology that a lot of times things get on the list that 10 years ago were state of the art and now they're really trivial, but they're still on the list. And then the new technology comes, they have not been considered, they're not anywhere. And when the companies establish business, start selling that, and all of a sudden it comes back, oh, that's definitely that's a restriction.
Yeah, that's again, the Bureau of Industry and Security, or if it's military, it'd be the Department of Defense Trade Controls. So Commerce handles dual use products, and then Department of Defense Trade Controls, which is actually part of the State Department. But what I would always suggest, and what we always suggest, is I'm not an expert in export licensing laws. Those are my colleagues that are in the Bureau of Industry and Security. But I can certainly walk you through the regs. I can point out to you different aspects of it. But we always suggest that you talk to BIS. You can always ask for a classification request. And so you just need to, like as Chris was saying, you just need to know whether your technology is on the export commerce control list. And so what you can always ask for, as I said, a classification request and whether or not that would be, your technology would fall. So we just always suggest that. And that you just, and they do training programs, in fact, twice a year. BIS at Irvine does a training program to set up compliance programs to be able to, like, how do I check the list and who, which ones do I have to check? But the whole compliance program, the export licensing process as well. So they're very, very good. They're very good. And companies participate every year because there are always changes. So because things are added, so they just had a major revision when they moved product from the military list to the BIS.
Question, yes.
The program you say the training is here in LA, is it free?
No.
Okay.
No, they're using 2-day programs. So they just finished up one, and again, this is through the Bureau of Industry and Security. So if you just go on bis.doc.gov, doc.gov, so bis.doc.gov, that'll take you to the website, and they always list their training programs. And they're usually 2-day training programs. The next one will be by the Los Angeles airport. Usually it's around $100. And the price, I don't want to, usually it's about $400 because it's a 2-day program. And so they have to cover the cost of the 2-day program.
Question.
More about the product side. So if you're going to be exporting an actual product from the United States, I mean, it sounds like it's very difficult with all the legalities behind it, getting into the country and, establishing staff. I mean, don't you want to try to test the market in an e-commerce site first? And if you're doing all that translation, what do you have to worry about if you are selling a product within a country? What do you have to worry about on the legality side for that product, just selling it virtually?
I can answer that one too.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's something very close to our hearts because obviously it's such an extraordinary opportunity. And it's a way for companies to start and to get, as you said, to get feedback on their product issue. But there again, you just need to know what you're getting into. And we have tried very hard to put information. We have what we call our e-commerce innovation lab. And we have spent 2 years populating that with information about what you need to know to sell online. And it could be everything from whether you're going to be on a platform, and if you're going to be on a platform, like I guess I've heard legal counsel say, make sure you read the small print, because you just need to know what that takes. If you're going to sell through a shopping cart, how are you going to fulfill? How are you going to handle translations? And now we have the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations. And this is not to scare you. This is just to say there's information available, literally step by step, that you can read about what if I want to be in e-commerce business, what do I need to be thinking about? And we've interviewed companies that have actually done e-commerce, and you can watch their videos. And there's webinars. We've put webinars on there as well, so you can listen to actual lawyers that are very well versed in e-commerce transactions and companies, how they've maneuvered it. So there's lots of resources available, and there again, it's just really knowing. And I've had some companies who they did not start in e-commerce at all. They've been in business for 25 years, especially a lot of consumer-oriented products. They said, well, obviously now we have to be in e-commerce. And one particular company as well said she was the one of our longtime clients, she was the one that just turned that over in China, as an example, to her distributor. Because it was the market is so huge, and she said items in Chinese, you just really need to be very savvy in that market. So there's many different strategies to use that, and just please know that the resources are there. And there again, I can give you.
So it's not as easy as just putting a product on Amazon and putting it over in China and saying, hey,
You're still going to have to
deal with
product
a lot of
liability and everything like that, right?
And taxes.
Yeah.
So
it's what I was mentioning before.
just one quick question, then we'll move on. Yeah.
So I have a software company that for many years sold software worldwide. And we had a website, and it was a vertical market, the entertainment industry. People would go into the website, download our product, and give us a credit card. Are we breaking the law?
No, probably not. It depends upon the kind of software. If you're doing encryption analysis or data rocket tracking, you know,
Just
things
don't
like
tell
that,
anyone.
just-
You're good.
No.
I never gave it a second thought.
So, yeah, let's move on to the finance end. I just want to say, before we wrap this part up, for me, doing international business has always been about playing three-dimensional chess. Okay, if you're playing regular chess in the United States, there, the one side of the board, you have the legal regulations, you have the business culture. You have the same in every single country. You just have to know how to make the steps in between them and think deeper about it. It's not complicated, it's not rocket science, but it does require you to study, be on top of things. So I'm going to turn over now to Matt to talk a bit more about some finance issues.
Yeah, sure, happy to help. So international markets offer pretty unique opportunities. In America, we have the opportunity where a lot of foreign direct investment. We're the country that receives the largest share of foreign direct investment in the world. And a lot of people that are looking for capital, either to expand abroad or develop their business locally, they can learn how to structure their business to adapt to investors' needs abroad. So what I can say is that investors abroad, you have to really know, if you're looking to raise money, you have to really know the country and culture that you're working with. Different cultures have very different styles of doing business, and you could easily offend people if you don't know exactly what you're doing. So we have a lot of clients that like to go to Asia to place capital into different startups, into different real estate projects, and generating interest is a lot of work if you don't have local partners. So don't think you can go to a foreign country yourself without knowing the landscape. You need to have a competitive advantage. You have to have people who know you, who advocate for you. People in other countries, they invest usually based on people's reputation. In America, we're very lucky to have great securities rules and a lot of investor protection. It may sound like a really big pain in the ass, but it makes this world thrive in America. And that's why a lot of capital comes here. Investors know when they invest in companies into the U.S., we have like real laws, real protections.
I think you're just plugging lawyers there. I felt good for a second.
Like,
Don't worry, it's
people
all
like to hate on lawyers, but at the end of the day, they help facilitate a lot of transactions because it builds trust. Abroad, we don't really have a lot of those luxuries. So this is where culture really comes into play. I can tell you with Asian investors, if you happen to be lucky enough to meet some people, they've got more high net worth investors in China than probably any other country in the world. And if you go to a first meeting and you start just talking about your product and pitching them, you've probably lost the deal. Your first meeting with any Chinese investor, you were drinking with your investor. You were talking about your family with them. You want to know who this person is. Because in other countries, they trust you first, they learn about your product second, and then the contract is last on the list because they may not be able to depend on that. A lot of times, if you're going abroad, people are going to be asked, why you come into our country to raise money? Like, why here? Why me? Really what I could say is that there's pros and cons of going international. Locally, there's a big finance bubble, finance gap. And there's so many talented companies, not all of them raise money from venture capital. What do these 99% of these companies do? You have a rich uncle, that's great. And there's people that aren't fit here. But abroad, there's different types of opportunities. They like to have sometimes bragging rights that they've invested into U.S. countries. They want maybe to test the grounds themselves to see what it's like for them to do business here. You're gonna have different different like buttons that you can push. And you can say, you know, you can talk about how, you know, with foreign investors that, you know, this isn't something that normal conventional capital works for me. And, you know, this, you're looking for certain investors abroad, and because you could expand to their countries and you need their help strategically. There's no better investor, there's no better partner to have that's your investor if you're trying to go internationally, because they'll have a vested interest in helping you succeed when you expand. What I can say also is if you just have a domestic company and you're trying to raise money from abroad, there's some fantastic programs that you can also leverage. Some of these are known as EB5 investments, E2 investments. You know, there are different talents that you can bring over with L1 visas. And what it is you can attract foreign investors by investing in the U.S., and they can earn different visa rights or even residency opportunities by investing into your company. It's not easy. You have to really know how these programs work. And what our interest are in the U.S., the government allows for these programs because they create jobs. So what you can do is master how some of these programs work and just have your arsenal built up. Know the culture. Another thing that I find very important, when you're going abroad, there is a much bigger informational asymmetry as far as what you know and what the investor knows. You're going to have to spend a lot of extra time educating the investor on what your product or service is. You know, a lot of times they may not get it because, let's say you have an e-commerce company that you're trying to go abroad and get investors from. Asian countries love very busy sites with lots of information, and they can be very technical. In the U.S., you'll get slaughtered with something like that. You know, someone will come to your site and they'll see all this busyness and they don't understand what your message is and you're gone. So, you know, you have to take the time to kind of educate, know exactly how to adapt your model so the investors can understand and make it very relatable to them. A lot of times the benefit that I see with international investors, deals are definitely slower, but you can sometimes really get bigger investments, sometimes way better terms, because you know, you're dealing with emerging markets that want to sometimes park their money in the U.S. and it's an opportunity. So it's not easy. There's, you know, when you're getting investors from abroad, there's definitely security issues to consider. There's exemptions for foreign investors, but you have to know exactly what the laws in those other countries. Get really good experienced people to help you. Don't just, you know, if you land a good meeting with someone abroad, make sure, kind of understand what the consequences are of taking that person's money. It can be a nightmare. If you're marketing to a lot of people and you think you're exempt from, you know, different securities laws in the U.S., it just takes one mistake for one person to recommend your investment to someone who's connected to the U.S. or a resident of the U.S. and you broke your exemption. So just be smart. I'd say really focus on a country that adapts, that's very well custom suited for whatever your project is. I'll give you an example. You know, if you go to South America or Russia, you know, I've had clients that wanted to build different restaurants and they went abroad looking for money. You know, those cultures really love like the South Florida area. So their preferences made a lot of sense to be able to go to those countries and show relatable products so they can build a chain of restaurants, you know, in South Florida. If you were in, you know, Minnesota, probably wouldn't want to go to those countries. You'd have to kind of, you know, find other cultures that might relate to your service or product that you want to expand. So I'm here really to have a conversation. If anyone has questions, just interrupt me. You can, like, you know, talk forever. Please.
Before we get into the questions, I just want to cover one more area.
Sure.
And that's on some of the programs that are particularly towards the export side, the finance and so forth. Because Michael alluded how you can lay off a lot of the risk and so forth. Maybe Julianne, you can talk briefly about XM and SBA and yeah. And then you can add on, Matt, you can add on to those programs if you want to do that. So.
Are you familiar with Exim Bank and SBA, Small Business Administration, the Office of International Trade? Well, there again, these are government organizations, and they offer guarantees for financing. So, as an example, the SBA will offer guarantees for working capital requirements. Exim Bank offers credit insurance, so they will offer the guarantee for credit insurance. So for any company that's looking to sell on open account overseas, as an example, which can give you a nice competitive advantage, then Exim will insure those receivables through credit insurance. So there's wonderful programs out there that are geared toward helping companies be able to either secure working capital, as an example, either pre-shipment or post-shipment through SBA. Exim will offer buyer financing. So they will offer buyer financing for a buyer in a particular market, and they will also offer export insurance. So these are excellent programs, and there again, if you were ever at a point that you wanted to talk to one of the specialists with either XM or SBA, I'd be happy to refer you. There are those there's a particular specialist that covers West Los Angeles as an example. I could refer you to her. There's also for SBA. We have a specialist in our downtown office that focuses on SBA international finance, so helping with that as well.
So that will be SBA.gov?
SBA.gov, yeah, and then it's OIT, it should be SBA.gov, do OIT, or Office of International Trade.
Or once you get the SBA site,
Yeah.
you can just
Yeah.
Google it.
Office of International Trade. And XM is the same, it's XM.gov.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, but I know there are a lot of great merchant banks and purchase order financing and different banks that can help with international trade. So I don't claim to be as much of an expert in banking, but I know they're fantastic resources. If you have a buyer abroad and there's trust issues and kind of being able to get paid and have products delivered.
And just on that side, we're through our Export Accelerator, we're also working with some, we have now on staff somebody who is very versed in cryptocurrencies and setting up shopping carts and so on. It's becoming a big thing in places like Brazil because they can get around a lot of the regulations with having to get permission to import or currency controls, things like that. So you got to be, that's the future. Yes.
Question for Matthew. I know you are expert on the raising capital, but do you ever do the capital like the private sector put the money, like partner with you, and then you go overseas, like I pick like Singapore, and there is and then you see their farm or something, and you want to invest, so you take all the capital from the private investor here, and you put in there, so. And like a couple of months later, you got the return. So do you ever do that, or what kind of raising capital?
We definitely do private placements with family offices. Actually, we are connected some family offices in Singapore particularly, but our specialty is definitely helping. As a global investment bank, we like to place high net worth investors into U.S. projects.
So another country come in here, not you come to another country.
Yeah, we definitely do a lot more foreign countries coming into the U.S.
Okay.
Yes.
You got sidetracked before. Could you tell us the fees that were involved but for
In our
your...
programs?
Yes.
So because we are a federal government agency, our goal is not to, we charge what we are required to charge. So we are told we have to charge a fee. So as an example, I mentioned our Gold Key program, which is a program that actually allows you to travel, or it's a program that's set up to enable meetings, one-on-one meetings with potential buyers, potential distributors in the market. And if you are a small company, then it's $950. So then it basically, that's sort of our premier program that is on a one-to-one matchmaking type of program. Then you kind of come down from that, and so you could have a list of qualified companies. So if you said, you know, Julianne, I'm not really ready to travel to the market right now, but I would just like a list of qualified companies. I'm going to go to the market later. I just want to get this list right now and start to follow up and further qualify them. That fee is $750. Okay, and our goal is always quality, not quantity. So if we can come up with 4 to 6, maybe 5 to 7 really good companies for you, we're happy with that. So, because these are companies now that have seen your literature, your website, they've seen information about you. We've spoken to. It's a process we've gone through where we've had conference calls between you and my colleagues overseas, so they know exactly what it is that you're looking for. And now my colleague is the one on the ground doing the search for you. So she or he is going to find the best qualified company. If they can, they'll go to the facilities to just sort of vet the facility to make sure this is a viable company, that kind of an idea. And so that now it comes back to you in a list, or in the case of a Gold Key, where you're actually traveling to the country and you now meet with them face-to-face at their facility, as an example. So it's a very qualified, customized program specifically for you. And then our fees sort of go down from there. So you could request a content list, which may be $200, or you could request another type of program that kind of is really customized for what you're looking for in a market, and then that would be on an hourly fee basis. Okay.
Do you have connections in all the countries?
Not all countries, but we are in the major commercial centers around the world.
Okay.
So we're in most countries. Africa, we have about 8 offices in Africa. So we're not in all the markets in Africa.
But the State Department
Yes.
covers over,
Yes.
like I did in El Salvador.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
And where we're not, our State Department
Yeah.
colleagues are. And
So
so
virtually every place.
Everywhere.
So we'll work with our colleagues in State Department.
Yeah.
I work with them a lot in Africa. Exactly. That answer your question?
So another question over here.
I have a quick question for Julianne. You mentioned that Commerce has a program for e-commerce, but I didn't get the reference on that so that we could find out more about it.
So again, coming back to export.gov, do export.gov/e-commerce. And it's
Okay, there you go.
really, it's an excellent database. And it's all about the company. So what's on there is what businesses have told us they need, information that they need, and it's all about businesses talking about, it's all about businesses being interviewed to help other businesses. And so that's to pursue e-commerce. So it's all about the business.
That's where it's all moving.
Yeah. So export.gov e-commerce.
Well, yeah, one last question.
Just a quick question. A lot of products today are digital products. What's your role in that global?
That global digital space.
Yes.
You know, we do a lot of work with health IT.
With what?
Health IT. Information technologies, we do like
But
patient.
that tends to be products.
Well, I'm sorry, like this, you mean like just downloads? Or
Airbnb, Uber. Do you have any role to play?
Where we would probably come into play there is more on the advocacy side. So if a company is facing a trade issue, a trade barrier, and a market access issue because of regulations, particular regulations that are perhaps keeping that company out of a market, the regulations are in place that they can't sell in that market, many of those companies approach us, approach our officers, our senior commercial officers or our commercial officers overseas, and our advocacy office, as an example, to help with that. So just to clarify, if you're having an access issue, we have an office in Washington that is set up to help get a better understanding of what the access issue, what the trade barrier may be, and then perhaps at a government-to-government level, they can try to negotiate that away. Is there a current agreement in place between our government and that foreign government? There's many different ways that we can come into play. If you're competing for a government contract, so you are a U.S. company and you're competing for a contract overseas, our advocacy office in Washington, D.C. can help advocate for you. So we would advocate for U.S. business. If you're the sole bidder, we'll advocate for you. If there are many U.S. bidders, we will advocate for an American company. So our job is to get U.S. businesses business, okay? So there's many different levels we can play at that larger company level. If there's, it's more than likely like an Uber, it could be regulatory issues that they're facing.
They got beat up in China.
It could be regulatory issues, and so this is what we see, and this is where these companies rely. I don't know if we're working with Uber, I don't mean to say that, but if it's a company like that as an example, that's where we could. That's
Yeah, and just to talk about advocacy and just sort of clear things out here. When I was in El Salvador, the McDonald's franchisee down there basically went crazy. The McDonald's took away his franchise. It was a big fight and so forth. So I was going in advocating on behalf of McDonald's for the government, and he came back with a bunch of lawsuits. And the last I know that there was an arrest warrant for me every time I go back to El Salvador. So we're out there, they're fighting. So the last thing to figure out that we can close up tonight is how you can get in touch with us individually afterwards. Michael and I are prepared to give 15 minutes, each just whatever off-the-wall questions you have to sit down, talk through your issues and so forth. Just talk to Michael and I will just set up a quick time to chat. Be glad to do that.
Yeah, you can contact me anytime. I'm happy to entertain your questions, go for lunch, and learn more about your business and how we can help. So, same thing.
You can put his email address up on the...
Yeah, I think my card is up at the front somewhere on the front desk, so, yeah.
And thank you, everybody. I also left literature at the front, and if there's one piece that talks about our commercial service programs and services, if you just turn it over, it lists all of our contacts from my office. As I said, we have an office in downtown, and depending upon where you're located in your office, we work by industry sectors. So you would want to work with a specialist who focuses on a particular industry. I happen to cover healthcare as an example, healthcare technologies and franchising. Those are my two sectors that I focus on. Among some others, but we work by sector, so you'll see the list and it'll be available at the front desk.
Yeah, sure. And if anyone's looking to raise capital for a new venture, growing venture, or you want to go international and help find investors and need some consultation, I'll leave my business cards in the front. So, and I'll be here, so feel free to approach me. I'm a nice guy.